back to my channel. My name is Kaylee. I am a Florida film, wedding, and portrait photographer, and I'm really glad you're here today. I took a little break last week from sharing about my film journey, but if you're new here, I've been working on this series for a few weeks now that chronicles my film journey from my very first film session all the way to, I guess, right now. So I've been walking through each film session from the beginning, one by one, editing them and critiquing them in hindsight so that you can see what I succeeded with and what I kind of messed up on, so that hopefully you can learn something too. So let's go ahead and pop on in. So this session here is on Portra 400, and so far my narrative during these sessions has been telling you what film I was shooting with and what my metering technique was, and so far my metering technique on nearly all of my film rolls so far has been without a light meter, and I've just overexposed by one stop in camera. And so that's what I had been doing so far, is just overexposing. I'd look at the little meter, the light meter dial inside the viewfinder, and I would scroll my shutter speed up one stop or adjust my aperture as I saw fit. But this session in particular is slightly different because I learned a lot about the exposure limits of Portra and also lighting conditions and location. This session was shot 2 stops overexposed in camera. I did not do it via ISO, I didn't do it via aperture, I just used my shutter speed dial to dial up my shutter speed up to 1 1/250th of a second or 1/125th of a second. I just looked in the viewfinder and dialed it up 2 stops overexposed in camera. And when I got these scans back, of course I loved them. They were film, they were Portra, and they turned out usable, but I started to notice that because it was an overcast day, that my images started to lose depth. I used, let's see, a 50mm 1.8, I think, on this, and the lighting was subpar. It was just a super overcast day, and I remember it being kind of hot and sticky and just a weird lighting situation, but it proves that Portra is so versatile and you can use it in so many different light situations. So I learned a lot about Portra by sort of the experience of trying to overexpose it 2 stops in camera without a light meter, and I just started to realize that if it's an overcast day but there's plenty of diffused light on their bodies, like where you see there's plenty of highlights going on and there's a lot of dark shadows, but it's overcast, it's just sometimes it's a hit or miss. But with this one, I think it was a hit, but we just have to fix these just a tad bit, just bring back some depth. So looking at all of my images kind of side by side, my action plan is going to be to add depth. I don't need to add any more light. I have plenty of light, but by overexposing it, it really affected my shadows. So I'm going to go through each of these, and my plan first is going to correct my depth as far as shadows and lights go. So this image here, I don't need to do anything as far as exposure goes, but I'm actually going to bump up my contrast here. And already that just looks so much better. So I bumped up my contrast. Their highlights are a little bit hot, so I'm going to bring those down just a little. Same with my whites. Yeah, actually I don't think it's the highlights, I think it's the whites that I'm messing with. So just a quick insight still, again, if you're new here. My editing workflow is generally to just add one simple preset to my film scans and then only adjust lighting via the exposure and contrast panel here, and then maybe a little bit of color like temperature and tint, but usually I don't have to do all that much. So these here are just really small micro adjustments that would take me maybe 5 seconds to do in real time, and then I move on and I'm good. I need to crop this a little bit, so I'm going to bring this in and crop. Okay, that looks good. And then up here I'm going to bring up my shadows just a tad bit. I decided I didn't want to bring the shadows down. I wanted to bring them up so that my branches aren't so dark here. Okay, and then lastly, I'm going to bring up my tint just a little bit, my magenta up maybe 10 clicks, because it was feeling a little green. There's a lot of green going on here. I just had to kind of counter that just a little bit. And then maybe only 2 clicks of warmth, and I think that's good. Okay, yep, that is okay to me. So let's look at before and after. 2 clicks of saturation. And then I'm good. Okay, before and after, and I think that looks way better. Okay, let's move on. All right, this poor image. I didn't deliver this to the family because it's clearly out of focus. Yikes. But I really liked how his little toes were in focus, and it was just, I considered it to be a little bit more artsy-fartsy and not just for the general consumer. They had other images of him that are really clear and cute and just really take advantage of his sweet little babiness. But I kept this one in general because I liked his toes. I didn't cull it out in the beginning. I liked it because I kept that his toes were in focus, and I liked that there was this ivy background, and I really liked that you can see Dad's arm back here holding him up, because obviously he's like 4 or 5 months old here, and he can't sit up by himself over here. So I really liked how it was just this little real moment of like artsiness mixed with almost like a documentary feel almost. It's just, it looks like something that you would love to look at like 10 to 20 to 30 years in the future. Like, look at Dad's arm holding you up, that's so cute, you know. So I kept it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start first by cropping a little bit. He's a little off, and if I'm going to make his toes the focus of this image, I need to crop it so that his toes are actually aligning with the rule of thirds here and kind of in the center of this image. So we want it to look nicely composed. So here's toes. Again, all I need to do is just add a little bit of contrast because I don't need to add any exposure, and I don't feel like I need to take any away. My exposure is good. So I'm going to keep my exposure the same, up my contrast by 25, and my highlights are going to come down a little. I'm going to increase my blacks to make his feet in this area down here pop, the area that's in focus. I'm going to make it pop a little more. And then as far as color goes, I'm going to warm it up by 5 and add 10 clicks of magenta. Actually, I'm going to bring that down to 6. I also edit a lot by eye, so there's not really like a specific set of coordinates that you plug in and your image will be perfect. It's just as you get used to your workflow, you kind of know what you're looking for and you know what your style is, it'll take no time at all. And maybe a little bit of saturation. I've been really loving that saturation and vibrance toggle here lately. It just really makes my colors pop. Okay, and there's before and after. If I wanted to, something I was playing with whenever I was editing this image was I was playing with the idea of cropping it down to sort of just his hands and his toes, because he looks like a little man, and I think that's so cute. He just looks like just like a little gentleman. So I was just gonna kind of crop it down because his face is what you initially look at, but it's not in focus, and so it's just kind of wasted space there. So I was just going to end up cropping to his toes and his hands, but that's another option for cropping a composition if you want. Just to kind of save the image. Okay, ooh, this one's easy. So up my contrast because my exposure is good to go. My blacks are going to come down a little, but my shadows are going to come up. So back here, this is just generally a heavy image because of all of the dark leaves and wooded area back here. It just kind of translates as a really heavy image, and so I'm going to just a little bit of cropping is going to help me kind of zero in on them as the subject instead of there being so much background over here. And that's just a general tip that I have for getting brighter and lighter images that don't feel so heavy because paying attention to your location can do so much for your images. Let's look side by side really quick at this image and this image here. This image and this image. This feels heavy, even though it's closer up and you've got a lot of like light going on touching her dress and their faces, and it's just they're closer up. But this is just a lighter image overall, and it looks really well composed. There's space above their heads, there's this light space, and then whatever heaviness we have in the image is way up top over here, which I personally like. This is not like a rule of thumb for a general application. I personally like whenever a film scan or an image is well composed, and there's just a really nice distribution of things that are heavy and things that are light, and it's just generally well composed, so I really like that. So see the difference here of just it's so dark and heavy back here, and then right here it's very light and more airy. And I'm not really classifying myself as a light and airy quote unquote photographer here, but I do like for my image to be brighter and more luminant, and I think that styling an image like this really helps. So here we are with this image. What was I doing here? I was adding some contrast and some pop. Okay, so I'm going to actually take my shadows back down a little, not as much, and then my blacks can about stay where they are. I was just trying to mess with this background back here to ensure that it stays kind of on the lighter side so it just doesn't look so heavy. The only plus that I see to having this background like this is that it makes his little baby head stand out and pop out from the background, which is the only reason why I deliver this image, is because it's just a sweet moment between a father and a son and a wife and a mom. But I liked that you can see his little hairs, his baby hairs sticking out here up against the background, which is the only plus. So I thought that was super cute. Okay, let's get before and after. Before and after. Actually, I'm going to add a little bit of warmth here. I'm going to make that a 7, and then magenta is going to go up 2 clicks. Okay, and there's our before and after. Okay, and lastly, I'm going to edit this image, and then we'll be done. So I'm going to add contrast as per usual. And so my game plan for this image here is just to add contrast to make it pop, and then adjust colors because their skin's looking a little green here. So I'm going to add the contrast, add a little bit of black and make it pop out, but bring up my shadows. And then lastly, I just know that I need to add about 20 plus 20 of magenta, and then a little bit of warmth here. So okay, and let's see how that looks side by side. Oh yeah, that looks a lot better. It just looks more lively too when you add warmth. I'm a big fan of warmth. I guess that's why I shoot portrait, because it's just a naturally warm film. You don't have to do much to make it warm. I think that looks okay to me. Let's bring down my blacks just a little more and make that pop. Okay, before and after. Okay, let's go through the befores and afters on all these images. Before and after. Before and after. Before and after. And before and after. Okay, thank you again for joining me. As you know, from the past video here, I have been sharing a lot of resources and links beneath my video here. So if you want to see whatever gear I carry in my film bag or in my photography bag, goes to the comments below. And also, if you are looking to connect with other film photographers who love to shoot film and love to shoot hybrid, which is digital and film, you can go to the bio down beneath and go click on the link that goes to my Facebook group, the Kindred & Co., a film photography Facebook group. It's an exclusive private group for my students who love to learn from YouTube videos or who are part of my mailing list. Go ahead and go join that down below if you want to have a little bit more directed instruction as far as film photography goes, or if you want to be able to get a hold of me personally to ask questions. I invite you to join that Facebook group for film photographers. And you can also find a lot of other goodies down below, like freebies, and connect with me on social media if you want. I am excited to hear from you, and I'm excited to see you join the Kindred community. So thanks again, and I will see you next week. Bye!